Now, here's something I hope I get to say every week, but fuck me, was that episode better than the last two.
You're goddamn right.
This one may not have been a narratively heavy installment, and will no doubt have people bitching over the lack of consideration for the plot devices of this season in Thrawn and Ezra, but I'd like to take a second and get you all to realise we just had a decently directed, dynamic, humorous, action-packed, contextually rich, character-focused episode.
No, he's got a point.
That works to prove that you can have exhilarating battle sequences within televised programming, well-conceived political scenes, equally comical and jarring moments of will she won't she in the case of Sabine's training, and exposition that greatly adds to the lore of Star Wars by confirming intergalactic space jumps are possible and were influenced by the presence of the Purrgil.
I knew it.
I will confess too, this is the first episode of the season that felt like everything aligned into place, with Rosario stepping into the role of Ahsoka properly, Natasha and Mary Elizabeth are almost there in their delivery of Sabine and Hera, having a couple of scenes here that resemble the ladies we know, and Huang continues to steal the show.
My man!
However, to play devil's advocate, this one was lacking in any credible movements from our assortment of antagonists, except for a display of egos where Shin and Elsbeth seem to be at odds with each other, both wanting the prey of Ahsoka, and Skull appears regretful for having to send his forces after her by the end.
Why did you make me do this?
This one begins with Sabine training against Huang in lightsaber formations, where Ahsoka feels the need to expand her abilities and try to possibly tap into the Force for guidance when blinded, as she tries to track Ahsoka's movements and gets caught out by losing herself to her own frustrations. During this time, Sabine reveals that Huang's honesty over her position within the Jedi Order wouldn't have existed due to her ineptitude and how easily she falls to her anger.
Bitch, why you fail?
Which Ahsoka feels is stopping the young lass from reaching her potential, as all she's hearing is rejection. Elsewhere, Hera approaches the New Republic Senate with information of Corellia and Thrawn's return, where she's greeted by a group of randos, but to my surprise, Chancellor Mon Mothma, and a fun appearance that won't mean anything to anyone of Senator Xenon, father of Star Wars Resistance lead character Kazuda Xenon.
That's a made-up word.
What was made up?
Who gets a true moment to shine here by demonstrating the ignorance of the New Republic that are so blinded by their peaceful ways and desire for good that the senators outrightly dismiss Hera's claims of Thrawn's return.
What are you, fucking stupid?
Marking it as merely an attempt to collect forces to hunt for Ezra once again, telling us that she's done this once or twice before. Hera gets incensed by this accusation and almost loses it with the senators until Mothma tells her to leave until they come to the decision that we all know was coming, and that is that they won't be sending any New Republic forces out to support Ahsoka and Sabine's hunt for Elsbeth. But before cutting back, we are greeted with a sight of Jason Syndulla, Hera, and the late Kanan Jarrus' son.
Are you crying? Am I crying? No, I'm not crying. You're crying.
We jump back to the girls though, who start to discuss Sabine's faults with the Force and training, where they're informed that they're on their own, and arrive at Cetos, where they're quickly engaged by Shin and her forces. Where after a little tension in how to approach the situation, Ahsoka concedes and lets Sabine take the reins in this one of taking out Elsbeth's forces, but to understand what they're dealing with, Huang wants to scan the Eye of Sion, and the only way to achieve that is by getting up close to it. Huang gets the scan as the ship takes considerable damage, but Sabine manages to get it back online as Ahsoka gives us a pretty cool space saber sequence, and the group fly down towards the planet's surface, encountering a large group of Purrgil in the clouds that provide cover for them to evade Shin and Marok. And we close on Huang revealing that the Eye of Sion would be capable enough to jettison Elsbeth and co. out of this galaxy into another, in search of Thrawn, and mentions that the sacred Jedi Archive spoke of intergalactic hyperspace lanes that linked galaxies to one another using Purrgil migration paths.
Holy shit.
Now, there's a few points of interest that deserve a mention here, starting with the importance of the Purrgil that, when introduced in Star Wars Rebels, were thought to be nothing more than a simple addition of nothingness, and were dismissed by so many in the fanbase until their return in the show's finale as the call to arms that Ezra needed to get the Empire away from Lothal.
It all makes sense now.
They have returned in spectacular fashion here, becoming an essential element to how this universe connects from galaxy to galaxy, with even the Jedi possessing an awareness of such creatures and the potential they possess in binding everything together. There are many threats that have been mentioned throughout Legends that many of this galaxy won't be prepared for, but knowing it's simple enough to traverse from one to another unlocks a slew of possibilities for what could be discovered, and knowing how itchy of a trigger finger Filoni has when it comes to Legends material, it's likely many additions to that side of things could arrive before we know it.
You know why? Because
you, that's why.
I said it last week and I'll say it again that this is honestly exciting territory to indulge in, as we can start to push the boundaries of our interests as fans and welcome a new age of oddities to this great universe. Disney Star Wars certainly hasn't gotten everything right, but this does carry potential in unlocking new storylines.
Prove it, ding dong.
Then to the New Republic and their steady descent into oblivion, as the remnants of the Empire grow stronger under their reign, due to their arrogance and the very notion of anyone wishing ill will on the galaxy again would ever exist beyond the fall of Palps's reign. Even when the writing is on the wall with what state this New Republic is in, with trying to implement their recovery schemes and rehabilitating once determined Imperial loyalists, they refuse to see the possibility of a resurgence that with Thrawn's imminent return could prove disastrous to all around.
It's over. We are screwed.
Zeon isn't a character I'm particularly familiar with, but I'm going to assume that his character here matches his previous appearances in Resistance. So his contentious attitude and behaviour may be appropriate here, but what struck me as odd here is that Mon Mothma seemed to dispute Hera's concerns too, whilst acknowledging their existence as well, despite being in a position once before where she had to convince people of greater evil in the shadows, yet no one would believe her. And even more confusingly, she was around when Thrawn was at the height of his ascendancy, so she knows what he's capable of.
I understood that reference.
You can tell in her delivery and presence here though that there's something a bit off, that she's more concerned with pleasantries and maintaining peace across the board, that she won't even allow discussions to continue through fear of Hera escalating things and creating a divide among the New Republic, as many would likely follow Hera into battle above any of these senators and certainly Mothma now, a woman whose actions were always a point of interest for the likes of Saw Gerrera, who despite his own shortcomings was right to call her out constantly for never going far enough in war and relying simply on diplomatic proceedings to resolve situations, where the opposition would never allow that. But as we've seen throughout The Mandalorian and now Ahsoka, the Empire is beginning to form once more, and we assumed it would be under Moff Gideon's leadership, but now I'm beginning to wonder if maybe this was all for Thrawn, who stands as the heir to the Empire and the greatest chance of reclaiming control once again.
See what you did there?
I am curious to see how this unfolds between the New Republic and its forces, as both sides carry different views to what is transpiring out there, where you have the politicians claiming nothing is afoot, yet soldiers like Hera and Zeb can see things for what they are, but as they have no power to shut it down without aggressive actions, people like them can only do so much before being deemed rogues. And as for our up-and-coming Jedi in this, Sabine is the largest point of contention for the show right now, as no one wants her to suddenly be Force-sensitive, yet we keep hearing mentions around her of the Force flowing through all life forms, and only a few have the potential to harness it if they can open themselves up to it.
Can't be that easy. It's that easy.
And last week I was certain that with Humang's mentions, Sabine wasn't Force sensitive, but carried the potential to wield a saber effectively given her combat history as a Mandalorian. However, this episode has flipped my understanding on its head, and as of now, I'm beginning to question whether she may actually be or not. I don't hate the idea, but it would feel out of left field for Filoni's level of writing, and I can't say that I'm convinced that the idea would have been considered all those years ago when writing the episode Trials of the Darksaber that everyone seems to be pulling reference to, as Kanan was training her to use the Darksaber then as a means to convince her people to join the rebellion, not become a Jedi. But I think until we have some more concrete evidence to the fact of whether she is or isn't, as of right now, I'm going to hold off on my speculations, as I think it's just going to piss me off if I try to think too hard on it. I'd rather let the story unfold as intended right now and compile my thoughts after.
I prefer to let George Lucas disappoint me in the order he intended.
And a special mention has to go out to Huang in this, that dug up all the chuckles that I had for this week, with David truly defining this character as his own, but also one that has an ability to adapt. As a believer in the dogmatic approach to how the Jedi Orthodoxy is taught, is starting to understand that this isn't the Jedi Order of old anymore, and even goes as far as to reference the fact that Sabine is just another in the line of unconventional Jedi that follows itself back to Ahsoka, then Anakin, then Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and lastly Dooku, leading the droid to believe that perhaps this is time for a change. And acknowledging such a lineage reminds us at least that Ahsoka taking Sabine under her wing isn't out of place for her, as Filoni has always written her to be an embodiment of balance and a maverick in her own right, who seems prepared to break Jedi traditions for the sake of continuing a legacy through alternative means that would allow for anyone to access and practice the arts of a Jedi.
I don't know. I think that's a bit dodgy, mate.
And honestly, on that side of things, I'm here for it, as it could include Jason Syndulla down the road. I just don't know if I need every practitioner to be a Force user, but we'll see where this goes. However, as for the episode itself, I had a lot of fun with this, as it offers intense, visually engaging combat sequences, strong use of a screenplay, incredible puppetry with Huang, fascinating additions to the lore, and although it may not be a show designed for everyone, it certainly makes good use of the characters it can from other works like Andor with Mothma and Resistance with Xino. I definitely would have loved a little longer with this episode, but part of me is saying that it didn't need to be any longer, as it gave us what we needed regarding the characters and an awareness of what's next, and that's it. If an episode can offer what it needs without overdoing itself, then I'd rather writers do that as opposed to artificially extending it with nonsensical information or irrelevant inclusions.
Grab a napkin, homie. You just got served.
The training sequence was a true bonding moment for Ahsoka and Sabine that helped to break the ice between them once again, and it was honestly a wholesome addition to both characters' journey so far, and Hera's scene with the Senators will certainly go down as a moment in history for her character that many won't forget anytime soon, and to see the Purrgil in such a profound way made for quite the spectacle. And overall, this was a pleasant experience that flew by, with plenty of setup for next week's mid-season point, with hopefully a lot more from Skull, Hati and Marok by then, but I think after next week we really need to pick things up and get to wherever Thrawn and Ezra are, so that we can start to understand Filoni's vision for the future of this period of time, before people lose their minds and call this an absolute waste. And while this does feel the strain of trying to be so connected to everything else around it, the focus on expanding this universe's storytelling potential and re-examining what a Jedi is creates a promising direction for this franchise, should they maintain a path that doesn't reject what people love about it to begin with. Anyway, that's all I've got for this week. If you like this, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe, and make sure to come back for the rest of my coverage of Ahsoka in the future. And until next time everyone, take care, and may the Force be with you.